The transport shuttle Endeavour cut through the purple atmosphere of Drakmor Prime like a knife through silk. Captain Sarah Chen pressed her face to the viewport, watching the ancient spires of the Dragon Council rise from the mist-shrouded mountains below. Even after 15 years of diplomatic service across the galaxy, the sight still took her breath away. "First time seeing the Dragon homeworld, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Rodriguez from the pilot's seat, his voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who had made this run dozens of times. Sarah shook her head, her reflection ghosting across the reinforced transparent steel. "Third time, actually, but it never gets old." She straightened her diplomatic uniform, the deep blue fabric adorned with the silver insignia of the Terran Federation. "What's our ETA to the Council chambers?" 15 minutes to landing, ma'am. The Council expects you at the 14th hour, Drakmor Standard Time."
Sarah nodded, reviewing the mission parameters one more time on her tablet. The negotiations seemed straightforward enough. Establish new trade agreements between the Terran Federation and the Dragon territories, particularly regarding the rare crystalline compounds that powered their most advanced technologies.
Dragons had always been fair dealers, if demanding ones. Their reputation for honor was legendary throughout the galaxy. The shuttle descended through layers of clouds that seemed to sparkle with their own inner light. Sarah had read that the atmospheric conditions on Drakmor Prime were naturally infused with trace amounts of the same crystals that made dragonfire possible. It gave everything an ethereal, almost magical quality that made humans feel like they had stepped into one of their ancient fairy tales. As they broke through the final cloud layer, the true majesty of the Dragon City revealed itself. Massive structures carved directly from living rock stretched toward the sky, their surfaces polished to mirror brightness. Graceful bridges arced between the towers, and Sarah could see the massive forms of adult dragons gliding between them with leisurely wing beats. Each dragon was easily the size of a Terran heavy cruiser, their scales catching the light of Drakmor's twin suns. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Rodriguez murmured, adjusting their approach vector. "Hard to believe something so peaceful-looking could glass an entire planet if they wanted to." Sarah had seen the classified footage from the Centauri conflict 30 years ago, before humans had properly established diplomatic relations with the Dragon territories. A single Elder Dragon had reduced 3 hegemony battlecruisers to molten slag in under 6 minutes. The footage was required viewing for all diplomatic personnel assigned to Dragon space, a reminder of exactly who they were dealing with. The landing pad materialized beneath them, a perfectly circular platform carved from black stone and inlaid with silver runes that pulsed with soft blue light. As the shuttle settled with barely a tremor, Sarah gathered her briefcase and checked her appearance one final time. Diplomacy with dragons required perfect attention to protocol and presentation. They noticed everything and they remembered even more. "I'll be back in approximately 6 hours, she told Rodriguez. "If I'm not back by the 20th hour, contact the embassy and prepare for immediate departure." "Understood, Captain. Good luck in there." The shuttle ramp descended with a soft hydraulic whine, and Sarah stepped onto the surface of Drakmor Prime. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth standard, and the air carried scents of sulfur and ozone that spoke of the volcanic activity deep beneath the planet's surface. But there was something else too, something clean and sharp that reminded her of mountain air after a thunderstorm. 2 figures approached across the landing pad, their footsteps echoing hollowly off the stone. Sarah recognized the species immediately. Catharan diplomatic escorts, tall humanoids with blue-tinted skin and elaborately braided hair. The Kitharans had served as intermediaries between dragons and other species for over 2,000 years, their natural telepathic abilities making them ideal translators for dragon thought. "Captain Chen," the lead Kitharan said, his voice carrying the musical quality typical of his species. "I am Ambassador Veltar. The Council awaits your presence. Please, follow me." They walked in silence across the vast plaza that surrounded the landing pad. Sarah took the opportunity to study the architecture more closely. Every surface was covered in intricate carvings that seemed to tell stories. Dragons in flight, great battles among the stars, and symbols she couldn't begin to interpret. But what struck her most was the complete absence of any defensive fortifications. No walls, no energy barriers, no visible weapons emplacements. The dragons' confidence in their own power was absolute. The entrance to the council chambers was a massive arch carved to resemble an open dragon's mouth, complete with crystalline teeth that gleamed in the afternoon light. As they passed beneath it, Sarah felt a subtle vibration in the air, as if the very stones were humming with contained energy. Inside, the chambers opened into a vast cylindrical space that stretched up into darkness. Arranged around the circular floor were 12 massive alcoves, each one large enough to comfortably hold an adult dragon. Soft light emanated from veins of crystal that ran through the walls, casting everything in a warm, golden glow. Only 3 of the alcoves were occupied. Sarah recognized the dragons immediately from her briefings. Elder Tessara, whose copper scales had earned her the nickname the Burnished One among human diplomats. Vortak the Ancient, whose black scales seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And in the center alcove, Council Prime Zephyros, whose silver-white scales marked him as one of the oldest living dragons in the galaxy. Each dragon was magnificent in their own right, but Zephyros commanded attention simply by existing. His head alone was the size of a small vehicle, and his eyes held depths that seemed to contain the wisdom of millennia. When he spoke, his voice resonated through the chamber like controlled thunder. "Welcome, Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation. We have reviewed your proposals and find them adequate." Sarah bowed deeply. "Exactly as protocol demanded. Honored Council Prime, I bring greetings from President Harrison and the Federation Council. We are hopeful that our continued cooperation will benefit both our peoples." "Indeed," rumbled Elder Fissara, her voice carrying subtle harmonics that Sarah felt in her chest. "Your species has proven surprisingly adaptable for such young beings. We are pleased to expand our trade agreements." The negotiations proceeded smoothly. Dragons, Sarah had learned, preferred direct communication without the elaborate verbal dancing that characterized diplomacy with most species. They stated their terms clearly, listened to counter-proposals with patience, and made decisions with swift finality. Within 2 hours, they had outlined the framework for agreements that would boost Terran technology by decades, while providing the dragons with access to human art, literature, and music. Commodities they prized highly. It was during a brief recess that Sarah decided to explore the adjacent corridors. She had been granted freedom of movement within the public areas of the complex, and her natural curiosity had always served her well in understanding alien cultures. The corridors were lined with more of the story carvings, and she found herself drawn deeper into the complex, following a particular narrative that seemed to depict the history of dragon civilization. The carvings led her down a gradually descending ramp that opened into another large chamber. But this one was different. Where the council chamber had been filled with golden light and the dignity of ages, this space felt oppressive, almost claustrophobic despite its size. The ceiling was lower, the walls darker, and the air carried a tension that made her skin prickle. In the center of the chamber stood a series of crystalline enclosures, each one roughly the size of a large earth elephant. They glowed with the same blue light she had seen in the ruins outside, but here the light seemed somehow wrong. Too bright, too harsh. As she moved closer, Sarah realized with growing horror what she was looking at. Dragons, but not the magnificent beings she had just been negotiating with. These were smaller, younger, their scales dull and their movements sluggish. And they were trapped, confined within barriers that sparkled with contained energy. Sarah approached the nearest enclosure and felt her breath catch in her throat. The dragon inside was beautiful, its scales a deep emerald green that shifted to gold at the edges. But its eyes held a pain that transcended species, a desperation that Sarah recognized with sick certainty. The dragon was female, and she was heavily gravid, about to lay eggs. Magnificent, are they not? The voice behind her was cultured, speaking accented standard with the fluid tones of a Kitharan. Sarah turned to see a figure in elaborate robes approaching, his movements carrying the careful precision of someone accustomed to ceremony. "I am High Curator Nixthul," he continued, his pale blue features arranged in what might have been a smile. "You admire our breeding facilities?" "Breeding facilities?" Sarah kept her voice carefully neutral, but her mind was racing. Nothing in her briefings had mentioned anything like this. "Oh, yes, quite essential to our continued prosperity. You see, Captain Chen, Dragon Society has become selective over the millennia. Our great elders prefer to mate only with those they consider worthy, often waiting centuries between clutches. But the demand for dragon-born individuals in various administrative and military roles throughout the galaxy continues to grow." Sarah stared at the confined dragons with growing understanding and revulsion. "You're forcing them to breed." "Such an ugly way to put it," Nixthul said, his tone suggesting mild disappointment. "We prefer to think of it as optimization. These breeding stock are well cared for, fed the finest crystals, provided with every comfort, and their offspring serve honorable purposes throughout the coalition." What happens to the offspring? That depends entirely on their gender, of course. Nixtal gestured toward another section of the chamber where smaller enclosures held what were obviously juvenile dragons. Males are raised and educated, then placed in positions appropriate to their abilities. Many serve in the coalition military or diplomatic corps, quite prestigious positions really. And the females? The curator's expression remained pleasant, but Sarah caught something cold in his eyes. Females return here, naturally. To continue the cycle, Sarah felt sick. She had studied dragon society extensively in preparation for this mission, and she knew that dragons typically mated for life, that they formed deep emotional bonds with their partners and children. The idea of reducing them to breeding stock was obscene. How long has this been going on, she asked quietly. Oh, for several centuries now. Quite efficient, really. Production has increased by nearly 300% since the program began. Nixtal seemed genuinely proud of the statistics. Sarah moved to another enclosure, this one containing a dragon whose scales had once been silver, but had faded to an almost colorless gray. The creature's eyes followed her movement, and in them Sarah saw something that made her chest tighten. Recognition. Intelligence. This was no mere animal being kept for breeding. This was a person, as surely as Sarah herself was a person, and she was being held prisoner. The silver one there is our most productive breeder, Nixtal noted with satisfaction. 43 successful clutches over the past 2 centuries. Remarkable resilience. 2 centuries. Sarah tried to imagine being trapped for 200 years, forced to bear children who would be taken from her, watching her daughters disappear into the same nightmare that had consumed her own life. The dragon's eyes met hers again, and Sarah saw a flicker of something that might have been hope. I should return to the negotiations, Sarah said carefully, not trusting her voice to remain steady. Of course. Please, don't let me keep you from your important work. Nixtal bowed slightly. Perhaps you'll mention to your superiors how efficiently we manage our resources here, always looking for ways to improve cooperation between our species. Sarah nodded and walked back toward the corridor, but she could feel the eyes of every confined dragon following her. By the time she reached the main chamber, her hands were shaking with suppressed rage. The remainder of the negotiations passed in a blur. Sarah went through the motions, signed the preliminary agreements, exchanged the proper courtesies with the council members, but all she could think about were those eyes. Intelligent, desperate, pleading eyes that belonged to beings who had been reduced to breeding stock for the convenience of galactic politics. As the formal ceremonies concluded, Council Prime Zephyros addressed her directly. Captain Chen, your species continues to impress us with your adaptability and honor. We look forward to a long and prosperous partnership. Sarah bowed as protocol demanded, but inside she was screaming. How could beings who spoke so eloquently of honor maintain such a system? How could the galactic community allow it to continue? Thank you, Council Prime. The Federation values our relationship highly. As she walked back across the plaza toward her shuttle, Sarah's mind was already working. She had seen enough in a diplomatic career to know that sometimes the most important negotiations happen far from conference rooms and formal protocols. Sometimes, the most crucial decisions were made by individuals who were willing to risk everything for what they believed was right. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up as she entered the shuttle. How did it go, Captain? You look like you've seen a ghost. Sarah secured her briefcase and settled into her seat, staring out at the magnificent spires of the Dragon City. Somewhere beneath those beautiful towers, intelligent beings were living in cages, their children stolen, their lives reduced to nothing more than production quotas. Start the pre-flight sequence, Lieutenant, she said quietly, and send a priority message to Earth. Tell them I need to speak with Director Hassan immediately upon our return. Everything all right, ma'am? Sarah watched a group of young dragons playing in the distance, their scales gleaming as they performed aerial acrobatics around the towers. Free dragons, she realized. Male dragons who would never know the horror of the breeding facilities. Everything's about to change, Lieutenant, she said. One way or another. As the shuttle lifted off from Drakmor Prime, Sarah made a promise to herself and to the silver-eyed dragon, who had looked at her with such desperate hope. She would be back, and when she returned, she wouldn't be coming alone. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans decided that ancient traditions and diplomatic convenience weren't worth the price of innocent suffering. Some lines, Sarah reflected as the planet fell away beneath them, were indeed meant to be crossed. The Federation diplomatic offices on Luna Station buzzed with their usual controlled chaos, but Sarah Chen moved through the corridors with singular purpose. 3 days had passed since her return from Drakmor Prime, and she had spent every waking hour preparing for this moment. The weight of what she had discovered pressed on her shoulders like a physical burden, but her resolve had only strengthened. Director Hassan's office occupied the apex of the station's diplomatic wing, its panoramic windows offering a view of Earth that never failed to inspire visitors. Today, however, Sarah barely noticed the blue marble hanging in the star-dotted void. Her attention was focused entirely on the woman behind the massive desk, who held the power to authorize what Sarah was about to propose. Director Elena Hassan was a veteran of 40 years in interstellar diplomacy, her silver hair and lined face testament to decades of navigating the complex web of galactic politics. She had personally negotiated the first formal treaties with 17 different species, and had earned a reputation for careful pragmatism that made her both respected and occasionally feared throughout the diplomatic corps. "Sarah," Hassan said, rising from her chair as the younger woman entered, "I've read your preliminary reports from Drakmor Prime. Excellent work on the trade agreements. The crystalline technology exchanges alone will advance our energy research by decades." Sarah accepted the offered handshake, but her expression remained grave. "Director, there's something else we need to discuss. Something that wasn't in my official reports." Hassan gestured toward the comfortable seating area adjacent to her desk, her experienced eyes already noting the tension in Sarah's posture. "I see. Please sit down and tell me what's troubling you." For the next 30 minutes, Sarah laid out everything she had witnessed in the breeding facilities. She described the confined dragons, the systematic separation of families, the reduction of intelligent beings to mere production assets. Hassan listened without interruption, her face growing progressively more serious as the implications became clear.
"You're absolutely certain of what you saw?" Hassan asked when Sarah finished.
Sarah activated her personal tablet and projected a holographic display into the air between them. "I took these scans discreetly during my tour. The energy signatures are consistent with high-level containment fields, and the bio readings confirm the presence of at least 30 adult dragons in various stages of reproductive cycles." Hassan studied the data with the keen eye of someone who had learned not to trust her first impressions in diplomatic matters. "These readings could be interpreted multiple ways, Sarah. Dragon biology is complex, and their social structures have elements that humans don't fully understand." "Director, I know what I saw. Those dragons were prisoners, not willing participants in some cultural practice we don't understand. The intelligence in their eyes, the desperation, it was unmistakable." Hassan rose and walked to her windows, gazing out at the earth below. "Even if everything you've described is accurate, Sarah, what exactly are you proposing we do about it? The dragon territories are sovereign space. We have no legal authority to interfere with their internal affairs." "We have moral authority," Sarah said firmly. "And we have precedent. The Federation has intervened in situations involving the abuse of sentient beings before. The Altarian Rebellion, the Centauri Liberation." "Those were entirely different situations," Hassan interrupted. "In both cases, we were invited by legitimate resistance movements. We had legal cover under coalition law and significant military advantages. None of those factors apply here." Sarah stood and moved to join her superior at the window. "Then we create the factors we need. Director, I've spent the last 3 days researching Dragon Society and coalition law. There are provisions under the Galactic Sentience Protection Accords that could apply here. Article 7 specifically addresses the forcible breeding of intelligent species." Hassan turned to face her, eyebrows raised.
"The dragons are founding members of the coalition, Sarah."
"Those accords were written with their input and approval. If this breeding program exists as you describe, they've found ways to justify it under existing law. Or they've hidden it well enough that most coalition members don't know it exists." Sarah activated another display on her tablet. "I've been cross-referencing diplomatic reports from the past century. Look at this pattern." The holographic display showed a timeline of dragon population statistics, trade agreements, and military deployments. Sarah highlighted specific data points as she spoke. Dragon population growth has been artificially steady for the past 3 centuries, despite what should be natural fluctuations. Their military and diplomatic personnel assignments show an unusual gender distribution, 80 to 7% male. And look at these trade statistics. Hassan studied the numbers, her diplomat's mind immediately recognizing the significance. They're exporting dragon personnel at rates that shouldn't be sustainable based on their reported birth rates. Exactly. The math only works if they're using some form of controlled breeding program. And based on what I witnessed, I believe I know how they're achieving those numbers. Hassan returned to her desk and activated the secure communication system. "I need to consult with the Coalition Legal Department and the xenobiology specialists." This is a significant accusation, Sarah. If we're wrong about this, it could destroy our relationship with one of the most powerful members of the coalition. And if we're right, and we do nothing, we become complicit in one of the largest slavery operations in galactic history. The words hung in the air between them, carrying the weight of moral certainty that had driven Sarah through 3 sleepless nights. Hassan studied the younger woman's face, recognizing the kind of conviction that could either save lives or start wars. "All right," Hassan said finally. "I'll authorize a discreet investigation. But Sarah, this has to be handled with absolute care. One mistake, one diplomatic misstep, and we could find ourselves at war with beings who could reduce our entire fleet to scrap metal." Sarah felt a surge of relief, but it was tempered by the enormity of what they were contemplating. "What's our next step?" "First, I want you to compile a comprehensive brief on everything you observed. Include every detail, no matter how minor it might seem. Then I'm going to reach out to some contacts in the Coalition Intelligence Services. If this breeding program exists, someone else must have noticed anomalies." Hassan paused, her expression growing even more serious. "But I need to know, Sarah. Are you prepared for where this might lead? If we expose this program, the repercussions could extend far beyond simple diplomatic protests. We might be looking at economic sanctions, military intervention, possibly even a complete restructuring of coalition politics." Sarah thought of the silver-scaled dragon whose eyes had held 2 centuries of suffering. She thought of the countless daughters who had been condemned to the same fate, generation after generation, while the galaxy looked the other way. "Director, I took an oath when I joined the diplomatic corps. I swore to uphold the principles of freedom and dignity for all sentient beings. If honoring that oath creates complications, then we'll deal with the complications." Hassan nodded slowly. "Very well, but we do this by the book, following every protocol and legal requirement. I won't have the dragons claiming we violated our own principles in the process of defending theirs."
Over the next 48 hours, Sarah worked with a team of specialists to analyze every aspect of her findings.
Xenobiologists confirmed that the reproductive patterns she had observed were inconsistent with natural dragon behavior. Legal experts identified multiple potential violations of coalition law. Intelligence analysts found correlations in data from across dragon space that supported Sarah's theories. The picture that emerged was even more damning than Sarah had initially suspected. The breeding program wasn't just a single facility on Drakmor Prime. It appeared to be a systematic operation spanning multiple worlds and involving thousands of dragons. The economic benefits to dragon society were enormous, providing them with a steady supply of personnel for their various enterprises throughout the galaxy while maintaining the facade of natural population growth. But it was the psychological profile prepared by the Federation's leading experts on dragon behavior that truly drove home the horror of what they had uncovered. Dragons, the report concluded, formed emotional bonds that were among the strongest documented in any intelligent species. The forced separation of families and the systematic breeding would cause psychological trauma equivalent to what humans would experience under similar circumstances. Sarah was reviewing the final compilation of evidence when her personal communicator chimed with an encrypted message from an unknown sender. The message was brief and cryptic. "If you're serious about helping the caged ones, meet me at coordinates attached. Come alone. Bring proof of your intentions." The coordinates led to a neutral space station in the Vega system, a notorious haven for smugglers, refugees, and others who preferred to avoid official scrutiny. Sarah studied the message for several minutes, weighing the risks against the potential value of whatever information the mysterious contact might provide. She found Director Hassan in the Situation Room, surrounded by displays showing coalition fleet positions and diplomatic status updates. The past 2 days had seen increased dragon military activity throughout their territory, though intelligence suggested it was related to routine exercises rather than any response to Federation activities. "Director, I've received a communication from someone who claims to have information about the breeding facilities," Sarah said, showing Hassan the message. "I'd like permission to investigate." Hassan read the message twice, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "Sarah, this smells like a trap. If the dragons suspect we're investigating their operations, they might be trying to lure you into a vulnerable position. Or it might be someone inside their organization who wants to help. Director, we need more information if we're going to build a case that the coalition will accept. This contact might be our best chance to get insider knowledge about how the system works." Hassan was quiet for several minutes, studying the tactical displays and weighing options. Finally, she turned back to Sarah. "All right, but you don't go alone. I'm assigning Commander Torres and a security team to accompany you. and you'll be taking the Defiant. She's fast enough to get you out of trouble if this goes bad. Sarah wanted to protest that the mysterious contact had specifically requested she come alone, but she recognized the compromise inherent in Hassan's offer. Given the risks involved, she was fortunate to be authorized to pursue the lead at all. 6 hours later, Sarah found herself aboard the Federation stealth corvette Defiant as it slipped through hyperspace toward the Vega system. Commander Torres was a career military officer with extensive experience in covert operations, his weathered face and quiet demeanor suggesting someone who had seen more than his share of dangerous situations. "Captain," Torres said as they dropped out of hyperspace near the coordinates, "I'm reading a small transport ship holding position near the station. Single occupant, but I can't get a clear species identification from this range." Sarah nodded, studying the tactical display. The space station was exactly what she had expected. A converted asteroid, with docking facilities grafted onto its surface in a haphazard arrangement that spoke of decades of improvised expansion. Ships of various configurations were docked at the facility, none of them displaying official government markings. "Take us in, Commander, and keep the weapons powered but not targeted. I don't want to appear aggressive, but I want to be ready if this goes wrong." As they approached the docking ring, Sarah's communicator chimed again with a message providing specific instructions for the meeting. She was to come to Docking Bay 7, alone, unarmed, and prepared to prove her commitment to helping the caged ones. Torres studied the message with obvious displeasure. "Captain, I strongly advise against meeting unknown contacts without backup. My team can shadow you at a discreet distance." Sarah considered the options but ultimately decided that the potential value of the information outweighed the risks. If this contact had inside knowledge of the breeding program, it might be the key to building an unassailable case for coalition intervention. "Commander, I appreciate your concern, but I need to do this their way. Keep the ship ready for immediate departure and monitor my biosignes. If anything goes wrong, you have full authorization to extract me by whatever means necessary." Docking Bay 7 was dimly lit and smelled of machine oil and recycled air. Sarah entered cautiously, her hands visible and empty as requested. At the far end of the bay, near a maintenance airlock, a figure waited in the shadows. As she approached, the figure stepped forward into the light, and Sarah felt her breath catch in surprise. The being standing before her was undoubtedly dragonborn, but smaller and more delicate than any she had encountered before. Her scales were a pale silver blue, and her eyes held an intelligence and pain that reminded Sarah immediately of the confined dragons she had seen on Drakmor Prime. "You are Captain Sarah Chen," the dragon said, her voice carrying the melodic quality typical of her species, but with an undertone of exhaustion that spoke of long hardship. "I am called Lysandra, though I suspect that is not the name that appears in the breeding facility records." Sarah stared at the dragon in shock. "You escaped from the breeding program?" Lysandra's expression was bitter. "Escaped implies that I was meant to be confined. I was born free, Captain Chen, raised by parents who loved each other and their children. But when I reached reproductive maturity, the curators came for me as they come for all females of our kind. I managed to flee during transport, but my sisters were not so fortunate." The dragon moved closer, and Sarah could see scars along her neck and wings that spoke of old injuries. "I have spent the past 30 years gathering information about the breeding facilities, documenting the atrocities, searching for a way to expose the truth, but no one will listen. The Coalition sees only the dragon territory's power and influence, not the suffering hidden beneath the surface." Sarah felt pieces of the puzzle falling into place. "That's why you contacted me. You were monitoring Federation communications and saw my reports from Drakmor Prime. Your species has a reputation for acting on conscience rather than mere convenience," Lysandra said. "Perhaps you are the allies my people need." The dragon activated a portable display device, projecting detailed schematics and data records into the air between them. Sarah recognized immediately that she was looking at intelligence far beyond anything the Federation had been able to gather on their own. "These are the locations of 17 breeding facilities throughout dragon space," Lysandra said. "Over 3,000 female dragons are currently held in captivity, with more being captured every year. The economic benefits to the dragon territories from this program exceed 50 billion credits annually." Sarah studied the data with growing horror and determination. This was exactly the kind of evidence they needed to build an unassailable case for intervention. "Lysandra, will you testify before the Coalition Council? Your first-hand testimony could be the key to exposing this entire system." The dragon's expression was grave. "Captain Chen, the moment I appear before any official body, my life will be forfeit. The curators have agents throughout the coalition, and they will not allow me to threaten their profitable operation. Sarah understood the dilemma immediately. Without credible testimony, the evidence might be dismissed as fabricated or misinterpreted data. But asking Lysandra to sacrifice her life for the cause was unconscionable. Then we need another approach, Sarah said. We need to find a way to expose the truth while keeping you safe. Lysandra studied Sarah's face for a long moment, as if weighing the human sincerity against decades of disappointment and betrayal. There is one possibility, she said finally. But it would require your people to take actions that the coalition might consider extreme. Sarah felt a chill of anticipation mixed with dread. What kind of actions? The kind that your species has become famous for, Captain Chen. The kind that ignore diplomatic niceties when innocent lives are at stake. Lysandra's eyes held a hope that was almost painful to witness. Tell me, how far is the Federation willing to go to free my sisters? As Sarah considered the question, she realized that they were standing at a crossroads that would define not just the future of the dragon breeding program, but the Federation's relationship with the entire galactic community. The easy path would be to work through official channels, file protests, and hope that gradual diplomatic pressure might eventually lead to reforms. But, looking into Lysandra's eyes, seeing the hope and desperation there, Sarah knew that gradual change wasn't enough. Somewhere in the depths of space, thousands of intelligent beings were living in captivity, their children stolen, their lives reduced to nothing more than breeding quotas. And the galaxy was content to look the other way as long as the economic benefits continued to flow. Lysandra, Sarah said quietly, show me everything you know. Every facility, every security measure, every routine. Because you're right, sometimes doing the right thing requires ignoring the rules that allow evil to flourish. The dragon's expression transformed, hope replacing the weary resignation that had defined her features. For the first time in 30 years, Lysandra dared to believe that her sisters might finally have a chance at freedom. And in that moment, Sarah Chen made a decision that would echo across the galaxy and forever change the relationship between humanity and the ancient powers that had ruled the stars for millennia. The secure briefing room deep within Lunar Station hummed with tension as Sarah presented Lysandra's intelligence to the highest levels of Federation command. Admiral Rodriguez, the Federation's chief of naval operations, studied the holographic displays with the calculating gaze of someone who had spent decades planning impossible missions. Director Hassan sat beside him, her diplomatic mind already working through the political ramifications of what they were contemplating. 17 facilities, Admiral Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the weight of command decisions that had shaped interstellar policy for a generation. Estimated 3,000 prisoners, and all of it protected by some of the most advanced defensive systems in known space. Sarah stood at attention before the assembled officials, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether her proposal lived or died in this room. Sir, Lysandra has provided detailed intelligence on each facility. Security patterns, shift rotations, supply schedules, everything we'd need to plan coordinated rescue operations. Captain Chen, interrupted General Morrison, the Federation's top military strategist, what you're describing isn't a rescue operation. It's an invasion of sovereign territory belonging to one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. The dragons could reduce our entire fleet to debris before we cleared their outer system defenses. Hassan leaned forward in her chair, her expression carefully neutral. General Morrison raises valid concerns. But we also have to consider the legal and moral implications of ignoring credible evidence of systematic enslavement. The Federation's charter is quite clear on our obligations regarding the protection of sentient beings. Sarah activated another display showing detailed analysis of dragon military capabilities and deployment patterns. Directors, admirals, with respect, I believe we're overestimating the military challenges while underestimating the tactical advantages we possess. She highlighted specific data points as she continued. Dragon military doctrine has remained largely unchanged for centuries. They rely on overwhelming individual power rather than coordinated fleet tactics. Their defensive systems are designed to repel large-scale invasions, not small-scale infiltration operations. Admiral Rodriguez studied the tactical analysis with professional interest. You're proposing stealth insertions rather than direct confrontation? Exactly, sir. Lysandra's intelligence indicates that the breeding facilities are lightly guarded because they've never faced external threats. The dragons assume that their reputation for invincibility provides sufficient deterrent. But our stealth technology has advanced significantly since the Centauri conflicts. Sarah activated a new display showing Federation Special Operations capabilities. The Wraith-class stealth ships can penetrate dragon sensor networks without detection. Small teams of specialists could infiltrate the facilities, extract the prisoners, and be gone before Dragon forces could respond. General Morrison shook his head. Captain, even if the infiltrations succeed, where exactly do you propose we take 3,000 dragons? They can't exactly blend in at refugee camps, and the moment word gets out about what we've done, the dragon territories will demand their return. That's where the legal framework becomes crucial, Hassan interjected. If we can present evidence of the breeding program to the Coalition Council simultaneously with the rescue operations, we can claim legal sanctuary for the liberated dragons under the Sentience Protection Accords. Admiral Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, weighing options with the deliberation that had made him one of the Federation's most respected commanders. The timing would have to be perfect. We'd need to execute all 17 operations simultaneously, present our evidence to the Coalition within hours of the rescues, and be prepared to defend our actions against what will certainly be massive dragon retaliation. Sarah felt a surge of hope as she realized that the senior command wasn't dismissing her proposal outright. They were treating it as a viable operation that could be planned and executed. Sir, I've already begun preliminary mission planning with input from Lysandra. She's identified several key vulnerabilities that could make the operations feasible. Sarah activated a new set of displays showing detailed facility schematics. The breeding compounds are built around central containment areas where the dragons are held. Each facility has a single primary exit route that leads directly to external landing platforms. If we could simultaneously disable the containment systems and create distractions at multiple points, small extraction teams could reach the prisoners and escort them to waiting ships.
General Morrison studied the schematics with growing interest.
What about the dragons themselves? They've been imprisoned for decades or centuries. Will they be capable of moving quickly during an extraction? Lysandra assures me that dragon spirit isn't easily broken, Sarah replied. The moment they realize someone is there to help them, she believes they'll find the strength to move, and once they're free of the containment fields, their natural abilities will make them formidable allies rather than liabilities. Admiral Rodriguez activated his personal communicator. Get me Colonel Harrison from Special Operations Command, and I want a full tactical analysis team assembled within the hour. Hassan stood and moved to the room's windows, gazing out at the earth below. Sarah, assuming we can make this work operationally, we need to consider the broader implications. The dragon territories won't simply accept the loss of their breeding programs. They'll demand justice, possibly through military action. Sarah had been anticipating this concern. Director, I believe the key is making sure the truth comes out publicly and decisively.
If the galactic community sees clear evidence of what the dragons have been doing, they'll have no choice but to support our actions.
And if the evidence isn't convincing enough? If the dragons claim it's fabricated or taken out of context? Sarah's expression hardened. Then we make sure the evidence is so overwhelming that doubt becomes impossible. Director, I'm not just talking about data and testimony. I'm talking about 3,000 liberated dragons telling their stories directly to the galactic media. I'm talking about showing the breeding facilities to Coalition investigators. I'm talking about making this so public that the dragons can't suppress it. Over the next 6 hours, the briefing room filled with Federation's top military and intelligence specialists. Colonel Harrison arrived with detailed files on every special operations team capable of carrying out the kind of precision infiltration Sarah was proposing. Intelligence analysts pored over Lysandra's data, cross-referencing it with Federation sensor readings and communication intercepts. The picture that emerged was both encouraging and terrifying. The operations were feasible, but they would require perfect coordination across 17 different teams, striking targets scattered throughout Dragon space. A single failure could expose the entire operation and lead to catastrophic retaliation. We're looking at a minimum of 85 special operations personnel, Colonel Harrison reported. 17 extraction teams of 4 operators each plus support crews for the stealth ships. Total mission duration from insertion to extraction would be approximately 6 hours. Admiral Rodriguez studied the operational timeline. 6 hours is a lifetime in a combat situation. What's our contingency if one or more teams are discovered before extraction? Sir, each team would be equipped with emergency beacon transmitters. If a team is compromised, they activate the beacon and the nearest extraction ship moves to emergency pickup. The risk is that Dragon forces might be able to track the beacon signals back to other teams. Sarah realized they were approaching the critical decision point. The operational details could be refined, but the fundamental question remained. Was the Federation willing to risk war with the Dragon territories to free 3,000 prisoners? Directors, admirals, Sarah said. her voice carrying the conviction that had driven her since that moment on Drakmor Prime. "I understand the risks involved, but I keep thinking about something Lysandra told me. She said that dragons measure time differently than humans do. To us, a few years of planning and preparation seems reasonable. But to the dragons in those facilities, every day is an eternity of suffering." She activated a final display showing population data from the breeding facilities. "While we're debating operational details, more dragons are being captured and imprisoned. More children are being separated from their parents. Every day we delay means more lives destroyed by a system that treats intelligent beings as livestock." The room fell silent as the assembled officials contemplated the weight of the decision before them. Admiral Rodriguez was the first to speak. "Captain Chen, I want you to work with Colonel Harrison to develop detailed operational plans for each facility. I want contingency scenarios, risk assessments, and resource requirements. We'll reconvene in 72 hours to review the complete mission package." Director Hassan nodded her agreement. "And I'll begin preparing the legal and diplomatic framework. If we're going to do this, we need to be absolutely certain that our actions are legally defensible under coalition law." As the meeting broke up, Sarah felt both elation and terror at what they had set in motion. The Federation was seriously considering an operation that could either liberate thousands of prisoners or start the first major interstellar war in over a century. She was gathering her materials when Admiral Rodriguez approached her privately. "Captain, I want you to understand something. If this operation fails, if our people are captured or killed, the political repercussions will be severe. Your career, and possibly your life, will be forfeit." Sarah met the Admiral's gaze steadily. "Sir, with respect, some things are worth the risk. If we succeed, we'll have struck a blow against one of the greatest injustices in galactic history. If we fail, at least we'll have tried to do what's right." Admiral Rodriguez studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Good luck, Captain. You're going to need it." The next 72 hours passed in a blur of intensive planning and preparation. Sarah worked closely with Lysandra to refine intelligence on each facility, while Colonel Harrison assembled the most experienced special operations teams in Federation service. Every detail was analyzed, every contingency planned, every risk calculated. But it was during a quiet moment, late in the second day, that Sarah had a realization that changed everything. She was reviewing facility schematics when she noticed something that made her blood run cold. "Lysandra," she said, calling the dragon over to examine the displays. "These containment systems, they're not just designed to hold dragons prisoner. Look at the power distribution patterns." The dragon studied the schematics, her expression growing increasingly horrified as the implications became clear. "The containment fields, they're not just barriers." "Then, they're suppression systems," Sarah nodded grimly. "Designed to weaken the dragons, make them more compliant. But if we disable them suddenly, the dragons inside might be too weak to move quickly. We'd need time for them to recover their strength." The realization forced a complete revision of the operational timeline. Instead of quick extractions, the teams would need to hold each facility for potentially hours while the dragons recovered from decades or centuries of systematic weakening. The missions had just become significantly more dangerous and complex. But as Sarah looked at the determination in Lysandra's eyes, she knew there was no turning back. They had come too far and learned too much to abandon the operation now. "We'll adapt the plans," Sarah said, "whatever it takes to get them out safely." Lysandra placed a clawed hand gently on Sarah's shoulder, a gesture of trust and gratitude that transcended species barriers. "Captain Chen, my people will remember what you're doing for us. Whatever happens, we will remember that when others turned away, humanity chose to act." Sarah felt the weight of that responsibility settling on her shoulders. In less than 24 hours, she would present the final operational plans to Federation Command. The decision to proceed would be made by others, but she knew that she had already committed herself completely to seeing this through. Somewhere in the depths of space, 3,000 dragons waited in captivity, unaware that their liberation might be at hand. And on Lunar Station, a human diplomat prepared to ask her government to risk everything for the sake of beings they had barely begun to understand. The galaxy was about to discover what humans were truly capable of when they decided that justice mattered more than politics, and that some cages were meant to be broken regardless of the consequences.
The stealth ship Phantom drifted silently through the void between stars, its hull absorbing sensor waves like darkness consuming light.
Captain Sarah Chen stood in the cramped command center, studying the tactical displays that showed 17 similar ships positioned throughout Dragon territory. In 6 hours, they would either be heroes or war criminals, depending entirely on whether their desperate gamble succeeded.
Final system checks complete, Captain, reported Lieutenant Commander Torres, the ship's tactical officer. All extraction teams report ready status.
We're receiving confirmation signals from the other 16 ships. Sarah nodded, her attention focused on the holographic display showing their target. Facility designation Theta 7, located on a moon orbiting the gas giant Pyraxis in the outer reaches of Dragon space. According to Lysandra's intelligence, this facility held 183 female dragons, making it the second largest breeding compound in the territories. Signal from Fleet Command, announced Communications Officer Park. Operation Chainbreaker is authorized to proceed. All ships have been given final go clearance. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. After months of planning, political maneuvering, and preparation, they were finally committed to action. She activated the ship's intercom system to address the 4-person extraction team that would be accompanying her to the facility surface. Attention extraction team, this is Captain Chen. We are now at final go status. Remember, our primary objective is the safe extraction of all imprisoned dragons. Secondary objectives include gathering additional evidence and documenting conditions within the facility. Questions. The response came from Sergeant Major Reynolds, the team's senior non-commissioned officer, and a veteran of more covert operations than he cared to count. Captain, what's our fallback position if the dragons are too weak to move quickly? Sarah had been dreading this question, but she had prepared for it. Sergeant Major, in that scenario, we hold the facility until they can recover sufficiently to reach the extraction point. Colonel Harrison's estimates suggest we might need up to 4 hours for full recovery from the suppression systems. 4 hours is a long time to hold a hostile facility, ma'am. Dragon security forces could mobilize significant resources in that time frame. Understood, Sergeant Major. But we're not leaving anyone behind. That's not negotiable. The extraction team consisted of 4 of the Federation's most elite special operations personnel. In addition to Sergeant Major Reynolds, there was Staff Sergeant Kim, a demolitions expert who specialized in exotic alien technology. Corporal Washington, a medic with extensive training in dragon physiology, and Specialist Jackson, a communications and electronic warfare expert who could disable security systems in his sleep. Approaching insertion point, announced the pilot over the intercom. Beginning final approach to the moon's surface. Estimated time to target, 47 minutes. Sarah moved to the observation port and gazed out at the moon below them. From orbit, it looked peaceful enough. A barren, rocky world with no obvious signs of habitation. But Lysandra's intelligence indicated that the facility was built into a natural cave system deep beneath the surface, hidden from casual observation but accessible through carefully concealed entrances. Captain, Specialist Jackson said, looking up from his sensor station. I'm detecting the communication array that Lysandra described. It's transmitting on standard Dragon military frequencies, but the signal patterns suggest routine status reports rather than any kind of alert. Sarah felt a measure of relief. If the facility was operating under normal conditions, it meant their approach had gone undetected. The success of the entire operation depended on achieving complete surprise across all 17 targets simultaneously. Signal from the Wraith, Park announced. Admiral Rodriguez reports that all ships are in position and ready to begin simultaneous insertion in 36 minutes. The next half hour passed with agonizing slowness as the Phantom maneuvered into position above the facility entrance. Sarah used the time to review the intelligence one final time, memorizing every corridor, every chamber, every security checkpoint they might encounter. The facility was built around a central containment complex where the dragons were held in individual cells. Surrounding this core were administrative areas, guard quarters, and the various support systems that kept the complex operational. The plan called for the extraction team to infiltrate through a maintenance entrance, disable the containment systems, and then escort the freed dragons to an emergency exit that led directly to a surface landing platform. All teams, this is Fleet Command. Admiral Rodriguez's voice crackled over the secure communication channel. Operation Chainbreaker is now active. All ships are cleared to begin insertion. Execute, execute, execute. Sarah felt her heart rate spike as the Phantom descended toward the moon's surface. Through the observation port, she could see the barren landscape rushing up to meet them, illuminated by the pale light of the gas giant hanging in the sky above. Setting down at designated landing zone, the pilot announced. All systems nominal. You're clear for surface operations. The extraction team moved with practiced efficiency as they prepared to leave the ship. Each member carried specialized equipment designed for the unique challenges they were about to face.
cutting tools capable of breaching dragon metallurgy, medical supplies calibrated for dragon physiology, and communication devices that would keep them in contact with the ship regardless of interference. Sarah checked her sidearm one final time, though she hoped desperately that they wouldn't need weapons. The plan called for stealth and precision, not combat. If shooting started, it would mean the operation had gone catastrophically wrong. "Remember," she told the team as they prepared to disembark, "we're here to liberate prisoners, not to fight a war. Minimum necessary force only. Our goal is to get everyone out safely, including ourselves." The moon's surface was harsh and unwelcoming, with jagged rocks and thin atmosphere that required environmental suits. But the team moved across the terrain with practiced stealth, following Lyssandra's directions toward the concealed maintenance entrance she had identified during her reconnaissance. The entrance was exactly where the intelligence had indicated, a reinforced hatch built into what appeared to be a natural rock formation. Specialist Jackson went to work on the security systems while the rest of the team maintained watch. "Electronic locks are more sophisticated than expected," Jackson muttered over the communication channel. "But they're still running on principles I recognize. Give me another 90 seconds. Sarah checked her chronometer and felt a twinge of concern. They were already 3 minutes behind schedule, and every delay increased the risk of discovery. Around the galaxy, 16 other teams were carrying out identical operations, and success depended on precise coordination. "Got it," Jackson announced as the hatch cycled open with a soft pneumatic hiss. "Security system is disabled. We're clear to proceed." The maintenance tunnel beyond was dimly lit and obviously designed for dragon-sized beings. The team moved in single file through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly into the moon's interior. But Lyssandra's intelligence proved accurate. After 12 minutes of careful progress, they reached the junction that would take them into the main facility. "I'm detecting multiple life signs ahead," Corporal Washington reported, studying his medical scanner. "Massive biosignatures consistent with dragon physiology. This has to be the containment area." Sarah felt her pulse quicken as they approached their destination. After months of planning and preparation, they were finally about to come face to face with the dragons they had come to liberate. The containment chamber was everything Lysandra had described, and worse. Row upon row of crystalline cells stretched away into the shadows, each one containing a dragon, in various states of physical deterioration. The suppression fields that kept them prisoner also sapped their strength and vitality, leaving once magnificent beings reduced to shadows of their former selves. But it was the eyes that hit Sarah the hardest. As the team moved through the chamber, dragon after dragon looked up at them with expressions that ranged from hope to despair to confusion. These were intelligent beings who had been reduced to breeding stock, their lives measured only in terms of their reproductive capacity. "My God," whispered Sergeant Major Reynolds. "This is worse than the intelligence reports indicated." Sarah forced herself to focus on the mission. "Jackson, begin disabling the containment systems. Washington, start your medical assessments. We need to know how long recovery will take." "Captain," came a weak voice from one of the nearby cells. "Are you real or am I dreaming again?" Sarah turned to see a dragon whose scales had once been golden but were now faded to a dull copper. The intelligence in her eyes was undimmed despite decades of captivity. "We're real," Sarah said, moving closer to the cell. "We're here to get you out, all of you." The dragon's eyes widened with disbelief and hope. "But how?" "The barriers, the guards. We have people working on the barriers right now. As for the guards, they don't know we're here yet." Sarah activated her communicator. "Jackson, status report. Containment systems are more complex than anticipated, Captain. I can disable them, but it's going to take at least 20 minutes. And when I do, every alarm in the facility is going to activate." Sarah felt her heart sink. 20 minutes was far longer than they had planned, and the alarm systems would certainly draw attention from Dragon security forces. "Do it," she ordered. "Reynolds, Washington, prepare defensive positions. We're going to have company." As Jackson worked on the containment systems, Sarah moved through the chamber, talking to as many of the imprisoned dragons as she could. Each conversation revealed another layer of horror. Dragons who had been separated from their mates, mothers who had watched their daughters dragged away to face the same fate, beings who had lived for centuries in captivity with no hope of freedom. But there was something else in their voices too, a growing excitement, as word spread through the chamber that liberation might actually be at hand. Dragons who had seemed barely alive began stirring with renewed energy, their natural vitality beginning to reassert itself even before the containment fields were disabled. "First bank of containment cells is down," Jackson announced. The dragons in sections A through F should be able to move freely now. Sarah watched in amazement as the freed dragons began to stir. Even weakened by decades of imprisonment, they moved with the natural grace and power that had made their species legendary throughout the galaxy. But she also noticed that many of them needed time to readjust, their muscles atrophied from long confinement. "Captain," Corporal Washington called out, "I'm reading massive life signs approaching from the main corridor." Multiple dragon guards moving fast. Sarah felt her stomach drop. The facility security had been alerted despite their precautions. In minutes, they would be facing combat with beings whose individual power could match an entire Federation platoon. "Jackson, how much longer?" 10 minutes minimum, Captain. I can't rush this without risking permanent damage to the containment systems." Sarah made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Reynolds, set up defensive positions at the corridor entrance. Washington, continue helping the free dragons toward the exit. Jackson, keep working on those systems no matter what happens. As the first dragon guard rounded the corner into the containment chamber, Sarah realized that the careful plan they had spent months developing was about to collapse into chaos. But as she looked around at the faces of the dragons they had come to save, beings who were beginning to believe that freedom might actually be possible, she knew there was no choice but to see it through. The guard was massive even by dragon standards, his dark green scales scarred by countless battles and his eyes blazing with fury at the intrusion. He opened his mouth to roar a challenge, but Sergeant Major Reynolds was already moving, his pulse rifle sending streams of energy toward the dragon's center mass. The battle for Facility Theta 7 had begun, and with it the first shots of what would either be remembered as humanity's greatest moral victory or the beginning of an interstellar war that could destroy both species. As energy weapons discharged and dragon fire began to fill the chamber with heat and light, Sarah realized that they had crossed the point of no return. Whatever happened now, the galaxy would never be the same. The containment chamber erupted into chaos as dragonfire met Federation pulse weapons in a deadly dance of energy and flame. Captain Sarah Chen pressed herself against the crystalline wall of a disabled cell, her heart pounding as she watched Sergeant Major Reynolds and his team engage 3 dragon guards in desperate combat. "Jackson!" she shouted over the din of battle. "How much longer on those containment systems?" 8 minutes, Captain," came the reply from behind a makeshift barricade. "But I'm detecting more guards approaching from the secondary corridors." Sarah realized with growing horror that their carefully planned extraction was turning into a siege. Even if they succeeded in freeing all the dragons, they would never be able to escort them to safety while under constant attack. They needed a new plan, and they needed it immediately. It was then that she heard a voice that cut through the chaos like a blade through steel. "Stand down, all of you!" The voice belonged to one of the freed dragons, the golden-scaled female Sarah had spoken to earlier. Despite decades of confinement and physical deterioration, she moved with an authority that commanded immediate attention from both sides of the conflict. "I am Aurelia, daughter of Council Prime Zephyros," the dragon declared, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the chamber. "And I demand to know by what authority you hold my sisters in captivity." The lead guard, a massive dragon whose dark scales bore the insignia of the curator's personal forces, stopped mid-charge and stared at her in shock. "Aurelia, but you're dead. The records show you died in a transport accident 2 centuries ago." Sarah felt pieces of a larger puzzle falling into place. The daughter of the Council Prime, one of the most powerful dragons in the territories, had been imprisoned in the breeding program for 200 years. The political implications were staggering. "The only thing that died was my father's knowledge of what became of me," Aurelia said, her voice heavy with centuries of accumulated pain and rage. "Tell me, Guard Captain, does he know where his daughters are? Does he know that the children of the Council Prime have been reduced to breeding stock for the profit of the curators?" The Guard Captain's expression shifted from shock to uncertainty to something that might have been fear. Sarah realized that they had stumbled onto something far more significant than just another breeding facility. They had found dragons whose disappearance would have massive political repercussions if it became public knowledge. "Jackson," Sarah whispered into her communicator, "forget the systematic approach. Can you trigger a cascade failure that disables all the containment systems simultaneously?" "Affirmative, Captain, but it'll cause massive power fluctuation throughout the facility. Could destabilize life support systems." "Do it. We need everyone free right now." The chamber filled with a low, harmonic whine as Jackson triggered the cascade. One by one, the containment fields flickered and died, releasing dragons who hadn't tasted freedom in decades or centuries.
As they began to move, Sarah saw something that made her breath catch in her throat. These dragons weren't broken. Despite everything they had endured, despite the systematic attempt to reduce them to breeding stock, their spirits remained unbroken. As the fields collapsed, she watched as magnificent beings began to remember what they truly were. But it was Aurelia who commanded the chamber's attention as she addressed the guard captain with the full authority of her lineage. "Captain Morthak," she said, and Sarah noted that she knew the guard's name despite 2 centuries of separation from dragon society. "You will stand down immediately and allow these humans to complete their mission. Then you will return to Drakmor Prime and inform my father that his daughter lives and that she has much to tell him about the fate of his people's children." The guard captain's internal struggle was visible in his expression. Loyalty to the Curator's warred with the deeper loyalty all dragons owed to the Council Prime and his bloodline. "My lady," he said finally, "I cannot simply ignore my duties. The Curators are slavers," Aurelia interrupted, her voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "They have violated the most fundamental principles of dragon society for their own profit. And when my father learns the truth, their punishment will be severe indeed." Sarah realized they were witnessing something unprecedented, a political revolution beginning in the depths of a secret prison. But she also knew that words alone wouldn't be enough to ensure the safety of the dragons they had come to rescue. "Aurelia," she said, stepping forward despite the obvious danger, "we need to get everyone out of here before reinforcements arrive. Our ships can provide sanctuary until the truth can be revealed to the Coalition." The Dragon Princess turned her attention to Sarah, and in her eyes was the intelligence and gratitude that transcended species boundaries. "Captain Chen, is it not? You have done something that none of my own people dared to attempt. You have given us hope." "Ma'am, what I've given you is a chance, but we need to move quickly if we're going to make it count." Aurelia nodded and addressed the freed dragons with the authority of her bloodline. "My sisters, these humans have risked everything to offer us freedom. We will go with them, and we will bear witness to the truth of what has been done to us. The galaxy will know what the Curators have built in the shadows." As the dragons began moving toward the exit corridors, Sarah's communicator crackled with reports from the other extraction sites. The news was mixed. Some teams had successfully extracted their targets, while others were encountering heavy resistance. But the overall picture was clear. Operation Chainbreaker was succeeding despite the complications.
"Captain, Sergeant Major Reynolds called out. I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching from orbit."
Dragon warships, at least a dozen of them. We've got maybe 20 minutes before this moon is crawling with hostiles.
Sarah felt her heart race. They had known this moment would come, but she had hoped for more time to get the rescued dragons to safety. "Reynolds, get everyone moving toward the extraction point. Washington, help any dragons who need medical assistance. Jackson, I need you to tap into the facility's communication systems." "What are you thinking, Captain?" Jackson asked as he worked on the communication array. "I'm thinking it's time for the truth to come out. Open a channel to Drakmor Prime. Maximum power, all frequencies." As Jackson established the connection, Sarah turned to Aurelia.
Your Highness, would you be willing to speak to your father directly?
Right now, while the evidence is undeniable, Aurelia's expression was fierce with anticipation. "Captain Chen, I have been waiting 2 centuries for this conversation." The communication system crackled to life, and Sarah heard the unmistakable voice of Council Prime Zephyros responding to the unexpected transmission.
Who dares to contact the Council Prime on an emergency frequency? Identify yourself immediately.
Aurelia stepped forward, her voice carrying across space to the father who had believed her dead for 200 years. "Father, it is I, your daughter Aurelia. I speak to you from the depths of Facility Theta 7, where I have been held prisoner for 2 centuries by those you trusted with the administration of our people." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the sound of dragon breathing and the distant rumble of approaching ships. "Aurelia?"
The Council Prime's voice carried disbelief, hope, and growing rage in equal measure. "But you died in a transport accident,"
the Curators reported. "The Curators lied, Father. They have been lying for centuries. They took me and hundreds of our sisters to use as breeding stock, separating us from our mates, stealing our children, reducing us to nothing more than production assets for their profit."
Sarah watched as the truth hit one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy like a physical blow.
Through the communication system, she could hear Zephyros struggling to process the implications of what his daughter was telling him. "The breeding facilities,"
Aurelia continued, her voice now carrying the full weight of her suffering and rage, are scattered throughout our territories. Thousands of our people, Father. Thousands of daughters, sisters, mothers held in cages while the galaxy believes us to be prosperous and free. Who else knows of this? Zephyrus asked, his voice now carrying the controlled fury of a dragon who had been betrayed by those he trusted most. The humans know, Father. Captain Sarah Chen and her people discovered the truth and came to free us. They risked war with our territories to save beings they had never met, simply because it was the right thing to do. Sarah stepped forward, knowing that the next few minutes would determine not just the fate of this mission, but the future relationship between humanity and the dragon territories.
Council Prime, she said. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation.
My people have discovered evidence of systematic enslavement within your territories, and we could not stand by while innocent beings suffered. We request sanctuary for the dragons we have liberated until the truth can be investigated by the Coalition Council. The pause that followed seemed to last forever. When Zephyrus finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made the chamber itself seem to vibrate. Captain Chen, you have done something that will echo through history. You have revealed a betrayal that strikes at the very heart of our society. His voice grew harder. As for sanctuary, you will not need it. Any dragon who has been freed from these facilities is welcome to return home immediately with full honors and protection, and those responsible for this atrocity will face justice. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. They had not only succeeded in freeing the prisoners, they had exposed a system of oppression that had operated in the shadows for centuries. Father, Aurelia said, there are 16 other facilities, thousands more of our people who await liberation. Then they shall have it. Captain Chen, I am ordering all Dragon military forces to stand down immediately. Your extraction teams will be given safe passage and full cooperation. And I want every facility involved in this program surrounded and secured within the next 6 hours. As if summoned by his words, the chamber filled with the sound of approaching footsteps. But these weren't guards coming to stop the escape. They were Dragon officials arriving to take custody of the facility and begin the investigation that would expose the full scope of the atrocity. Sarah looked around at the freed dragons, seeing hope and dignity returning to faces that had known only despair for decades or centuries. But it was Aurelia who approached her as they prepared to leave the chamber that had been her prison for so long. Captain Chen, the dragon princess said, her voice carrying gratitude that transcended language, you have given me back my life and my family. But more than that, you have given our people back their honor. This debt can never be repaid. Sarah shook her head. Your Highness, there is no debt. What we did because it was right. Because some cages are meant to be broken, no matter who built them or why. As they walked together toward the exit that would take them back to the surface and to freedom, Sarah realized that they had accomplished something far greater than a rescue mission. They had proven that justice could transcend species, that moral courage could overcome political expedience, and that sometimes the greatest victories came not from superior firepower, but from the simple willingness to do what was right. Behind them, the breeding facility that had held Aurelia prisoner for 2 centuries stood empty for the first time in its existence. And across Dragon space, similar facilities were being liberated as the truth spread like wildfire through the galaxy. The age of the breeding programs was ending, brought down not by revolution from within, but by the intervention of a species young enough to believe that freedom was worth fighting for, regardless of the consequences. As they reached the surface and Sarah saw the phantom waiting to take them home, she heard Aurelia's words echo in her memory. You have given our people back their honor. But as Sarah watched the freed dragons taking their first breaths of free air in centuries, she realized that the honor had been humanity's all along. They had simply chosen to live up to it. In the days that followed, as the galaxy reeled from the revelations of Operation Chainbreaker, historians would debate the political and military implications of humanity's actions. But for Sarah Chen, standing on that barren moon watching dragons spread their wings in freedom for the first time in centuries, the only thing that mattered was the simple truth that had driven her from the beginning. When you see suffering, you act to end it. When you see injustice, you stand against it. And when someone needs help, you don't ask about.